In this video we are going to take a closer look at the newly released box set Strike Force Agastus for Space Marines, which includes the brand new Brutalis Dreadnought as well as the Desolation Squad. In the first part, we will go through the content of the box set and the new datasheets. In the second part, we will then look into how to make best use of them in the Deathwatch. Lastly, there will be some modeling recommendations and a quick wrap-up.
Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer and I will be guiding you through this video.
A quick word on the box set itself. This is currently the only way to get both the new Brutalis Dreadnought and the Desolation Squad, unless you can snag some separately from an auction site or similar. As I am making this video, there has been no word when these models will be released separately. Next to the single Brutalis Dreadnought and the 10 Desolation Marines, the box also includes 5 Heavy Intercessors, as well as a multi-kit Primaris Lieutenant. For Deathwatch players specifically, we are one of the few chapters, if not the only one, that can actually use Heavy Intercessors competitively thanks to our Indomitor kill team, so getting another 5 can be a solid addition to our collection. While I like the Primaris Lieutenant kit for the different weapon options, and I hope this is the kind of direction that GW will continue to go with Primaris Models, there is some redundancy regarding wound rerolls in the Deathwatch army, and we might end up being better off hit bashing this one into something else, unless you do not happen to actually own one of the great many Primaris Lieutenants yet, in which case I would recommend keeping one for that collection. Anyway, what further stands out here is the printed booklet containing points and datasheets, which was printed prior to the latest Monitorum Field Manual points rebalance. The dead giveaway here are the old points values of the Heavy Intercessors, as well as the increased price of the Lieutenant in addition to him paying for all his war gear. But not enough, there was a little incident when GW released these datasheets online on Warhammer Community, as they initially listed the Lieutenant with these outdated points, which in turn meant that 2 conflicting Lieutenant datasheets were available. Yours truly promptly pointed this out on Facebook, and GW actually responded, then shortly after updated the online document to reference to the Monitorum Field Manual for the Lieutenant points. Now, the unfortunate part here is that GW did not rebalance the points for both the Brutalis and the Desolation Marines, even though they are clearly outdated by now. Perhaps we might see a change in the next balance status late, or at the very least a second Monitorum Field Manual, assuming this still happens mid this year. Having said that, let's take a look at the datasheet of the Desolation Squad. They are a heavy support choice and we can bring between 5 to 10 models. Their main armaments are the Castellan launcher, as well as either a Super Frag or Super Crack rocket launcher, which are the anti-horde or anti-tank loadouts respectively. The Sergeant then gets the option to swap his rocket launcher for a Vanguard launcher and the Targeter optics instead for an extra 10 points. This seems well worth it, as the Vanguard launcher is pretty spicy with strength 6, -1 AP, damage 2, blast and indirect. The unfortunate part here is the heavy D6, making the amount of shots super swingy. If the unit contains a Desolation Sergeant, it can also use the Signum ability, which gives a single model a ballistic skill of 2+. I think in addition to the steep rise of 35 points per model, that was clearly balanced before the latest Monitorum Field Manual, this entire unit feels like it was designed without the nerfs to indirect fire in mind, and the overall result feels a bit like a band-aid, where basically the Sergeant with the Vanguard launcher is the main selling point. This also means that there is no point to bring more than the minimum size, as it is the Sergeant that makes the difference between being useful enough and being obsolete. Moving on to the Brutalis Dreadnought, which is basically a more close combat oriented version of the Redemptor Dreadnought, gaining 2 extra inches of movement and an extra attack, at the very affordable 170 base points. By default, it comes with a twin Icarus Ironhail heavy stubber, 2 heavy bolters, 2 twin bolt rifles socketed into a Brutalis fist each. For 15 points each, we can replace the heavy bolters with multi-meltas, bringing the total points up to 200, 15 points over the Redemptor, which does not pay for any of its war gear. Furthermore, the 2 Brutalis fists and the 2 twin bolt rifles can be replaced by 2 Brutalis talons, which come with 2 different melee profiles. As a general recommendation, I would go with both multi-meltas and the talons, especially the latter simply outperforming the fists and the potshots from the bolt rifles. 200 points keeps him competitive, any potential future point drops will make him only better. As befitting for a Dreadnought, he gets the built-in damage reduction from Duty Eternal, he has core, and like the Redemptor, he degrades and has a chance to explode. With the datasheets out of the way, how can we best make use of these 2 new units in the Deathwatch? Starting with the Brutalis Dreadnought, which I think is the easier answer out of the 2. As we well know, Deathwatch does Dreadnoughts well, and the Brutalis is no exception. For those looking into Dreadnought heavy lists, running multiple Brutalis alongside multiple Redemptors is something worth looking into. But even outside of Dreadnought spam, as I have said many times, including a single Dreadnought into pretty much any Deathwatch list makes for a great addition. Distraction Carnifex, plenty of synergy with buffs of all sorts thanks to core, and generally easy to play, though I would rate the melee-oriented variant a bit more difficult to play than a Redemptor. What I do like about the Brutalis is that the short-ranged multi-meltas go really well with the claws and the dread wanting to go smash things as soon as possible, and such a loadout is far less swingy than the plasma incinerator of the Redemptor. I also think that Teleportarium in combination with the Brutalis is amazing, and one more advantage that the Deathwatch has over other chapters. Then moving on to the Desolation Squad, where things get a bit less obvious. As I am making this video, there has been no official word on GW's side regarding their inclusion into the Forest Kill team. As they are wearing Tacticus armor, this is where they would go. The main question, however, is whether we really wanted to include them into the kill team in the first place. As I mentioned during my datasheet review, the main selling point for the unit is the Vanguard Launcher Sergeant, which would be unavailable to the kill team anyway. Due to the Desolation Squad being a long-ranged unit, with even some indirect capabilities, there is also less need for ablative wounds in the shape of intercessors. Then finally, the Forest Kill team lacks a jump pack option, which means no access to fall back and shoot when getting tangled up in close combat. This would result in the main advantage being troops and therefore OPSEC, which is fine, but does not strike me as worth it if it comes at the cost of the Sergeant. Regardless of what GW may decide to do about kill teams in the future, I would personally recommend a single Desolation Squad at minimum size, with the Sergeant getting the Vanguard Launcher upgrade. And if one truly wanted to push it, we could also mastercraft it for a flat damage 3. While certainly worth considering in limited numbers at this point, I think they could do with an overall points discount. All in all, I think all of the models in the Strike Force Agastus box set are usable in a Deathwatch army, with my personal highlight being the Brutalis Dreadnought, which I just about managed to squeeze into my latest list iteration. Previously, I was running a single Redemptor Dreadnought, which I now replaced with the Brutalis running Talons and double multi-melta, which meant I had to find another 15 points, or well 12 in my case, as the old list was at 1997 points. While I could have dropped the Aquila Specialism on my Proteus kill team as an easy fix, I decided to take a more complicated approach, demoting one Eliminator in the Spectre's kill team to an Incursor with Haywire Mine, and the Chief Apothecary lost his Primaris. This made my list end up at exactly 2000 points, good times. In the near future, I am looking into shuffling things around further, making room for a minimum-sized Desolation Squad. Last but not least, let's have a look at some modeling recommendations. Starting with the Brutalis Dreadnought, while much of the build process is similar to that of the Redemptor, there is of course the question regarding magnetizing its loadouts. For the heavy bolters and multi-melters respectively, I recommend placing a magnet at the back of the weapon, which still allows for it to be slightly aimed up or down. For this, I went with the standard 3mm per 1mm magnets I use for magnetizing Space Marine arms. For the fists and talons respectively, the good news is that there are the parts for building the full hands of both loadouts, which can then be slotted onto the wrists. The wrist cover that holds the guns for the fist's loadout is again straightforward with a 3mm per 1mm magnet. Where it gets a bit more complicated are the claws or fists themselves. Here I would recommend placing a single small magnet in the area where there are the 3 fingers, as per the highlighted areas on the picture. I used the 2mm per 1mm magnet for this, which is enough to secure the hand in place. Then lastly, for anyone interested in using third-party vendor parts, the good news here is that the majority of the parts made for the Redemptor will also fit the Brutalis. This goes for pretty much anything involving both the torso and the shoulder areas. In my example, I used parts from Liber Demonica, and the only part I could not use was for the fist armor plating, as I needed these areas to be magnetized. In case magnets are not an option, I am positive that even that part could fit with the help of a clipper. Then for the Desolation Marines, I am aware that they did get a lot of criticism regarding their aesthetics, and I have seen various great kit bashes. For me personally, I don't mind their default configuration, and the difference between the Super Frag and the Super Crag loadouts are the top part of the weapon itself, as well as that thing on the backpack, both of which can be magnetized. There are enough parts for that. The same goes for the Venger missile launcher of the Sergeant. The only downside is that this requires a small magnet once more and a bit of extra care when drilling. Then lastly, for those crazy enough to magnetize the Heavy Intercessors, including all the different weapon magazines, I have a full guide for that available on my channel, the link is in the description. For the Lieutenant, I would also recommend magnetizing, simply to make him future-proof, and my loadout of choice here would be the Indomitus loadout, with the Neo Volkite and the Storm Shield, which allows him to chime in as a potential Dominus Aegis carrier. To wrap things up, over the course of the video, we have looked at the newly released box set Strike Force Agastus for Space Marines, which includes the brand new Brutalis Dreadnought, as well as the Desolation Squad. While the point values of these 2 new datasheets have clearly been balanced prior to the release of the latest Monitorum Field Manual, the printed version as well as the initial digital release on Warhammer Community suggest as much, they still make interesting additions to a competitive Deathwatch list. The more straightforward pick here is the Brutalis Dreadnought, best equipped with the twin talons and the multi-meltas, which brings him up at 200 points, slightly above the Redemptor. Here a case can be made for multiple Brutalis paired with multiple Redemptors in a Dreadnought heavy list, but I think also adding a single one to pretty much any list is a good option. If CP allows, deploying him through the Teleportarium creates some excellent synergy. For the Desolation Squad, the main selling point here is the Sergeant with the Vanguard launcher, which means that even if GW did allow them in the Forest Kill team, which they currently do not, we would most likely still be better off running them as a minimum sized squad of their own. While I personally think that they should get a points discount, I could see a single squad of 5 making it into a Deathwatch list. Keep in mind that we can also mastercraft the Vanguard launcher for a flat damage of 3. Overall, all the models in the box are usable in the Deathwatch, with the Brutalis Dreadnought being my clear favorite, and as always, I highly recommend magnetizing the loadouts. So that's it for the newly released box set Strike Force Agastus for Space Marines, which includes the brand new Brutalis Dreadnought as well as the Desolation Squad. Have you guys already gotten your hands on these, and are you running them in your Deathwatch army? Are the Brutalis and the Desolation Squad fairly priced at these current point values? Let me know in the comments. Then finally, if you made it this far and I still have your attention, if you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated as it helps me invest into future videos. For that, I have both a Ko-fi as well as a Patreon page, links are in the description. Furthermore, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video, give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again and see you next time.